Afternoon, everybody. Today I have more of a theory of a topic. It's something that I intended to do a video on a few weeks ago, and then with things going on and stuff with my court case and other things, it kind of got pushed to the back burner. But a recent comment on one of my videos brought it back to the forefront, and it's something I just want to discuss, in theory. I've read articles, over the past couple of years one way or the other on this theory, and the theory is are the INFJ and to a lesser extent the ENFJ personalities a result of abuse, meaning that could an explanation for the rarity of these two personality types, because if you look, most articles describe INFJs, we are between 1 and 1.5% of the world population, and most articles say ENFJs are 2 to 3% of the world population. And being as that we're big targets for narcissistic abuse, for abusive relationships, exploitation, things of that nature in our adult lives, did childhood abuse lead to us forming these personalities in our formative years? And I'm just going to say I don't know personally. I think there's some evidence in both the nature and the nurture case as to why we develop these personalities. Although I do find it interesting, some of the things that we have cognitive wise, higher in our stack, does kind of lend to the question of, well, why did we develop these cognitive functions as our dominant functions when that's not that common, especially in the case of the INFJ. And the interesting fact of some of the abilities we have as INFJs and ENFJs, like the ability of dissociation and how that relates in the DSM to other disorders. For example, the most common known dissociative disorder caused by trauma is dissociative identity disorder, which is caused by repeated childhood sexual abuse and the fracturing of the person's psyche, and how that relates to INFJ's abilities as chameleons. So getting into my thoughts on this theory is it's important to remember some things that most INFJs go through as a child, and we're very misunderstood in our formative years. Most likely you're going to be, unless you grew up in a big city, you're probably going to be the only INFJ that you know. ENFJs, you might know one or two others, but you have that better inclination to be social, being extroverts, versus us as INFJs. And, as INFJs, yeah, introverted intuition, number one function, least understood of all the cognitive functions. That's weird, huh? Well, why is that? And there is some theories that because so many of us underwent narcissistic abuse, we began to what's called living our lives on trial, meaning we were always on guard. We were always prepared to be judged for every thought we ever had, for any like or dislike in a topic that we had, just for voicing our own opinions on matters and just voicing how we feel and voicing interest or disinterest in a subject, and leading us to living our lives on trial, meaning we always have to over explain and justify every one of our actions because everything was put under so much scrutiny, and every question, even if someone's just asking it to us, out of genuine interest, feels like an attack, and it feels like you have to justify yourself and explain yourself and talk your way through why you think that way, because you feel like you have to justify every belief you have, and you have no right to your own opinion, because if you went through narcissistic abuse, you don't have a right to your own opinion. You're just as most of us were raised by narcissistic baby boomers were told, a reflection on me, meaning that you're just a pawn, an extension of the narcissist, and your only purpose is to make the narcissist look good and to, feed into their delusions of grandeur and deluded self-importance. So that does, become interesting along with the theory of those two personalities being created by abuse. I find it interesting personally, the INFJ chameleon ability, how, our speech patterns change and how we naturally, almost subconsciously, adapt to our environment without compromising our integrity or morals, but doing our best to try to blend in. We're very good at hiding in plain sight. If we don't really want to stand out in a group and not be noticed, we're very good at being able to fade into the background and just be like that silent wallflower who barely speaks up, who looks like a not important person of the group, but nonetheless can act as if they belong. And that brings me to dissociative identity disorder. Well, if you take that to the extreme level, in dissociative identity disorder, where the psyche fractures and forms different personalities, different alters to aid and shield the host personality from, in that case, sexual abuse and childhood trauma, it's interesting that, we know that that phenomenon of someone developing alters is a direct result of repeated abuse. So, is it too far-fetched to believe that the chameleon ability in the INFJ is a result of abuse, albeit to a lesser extent than repeated childhood sexual abuse? But could that have been developed by us in our formative years as a sort of defense mechanism to not stand out, not draw attention to ourselves, and just be able to blend in wherever we go? Yeah, I mentioned a little earlier in this video about dissociation. As INFJs, we have that ability to go so deep into our mind where we basically lose touch as to what's going on around us, and our face will be frozen in the infamous INFJ stare, and we'll just be so lost in thought, so deep in our own head, where we'll lose consciousness really of what's going on around us. You won't even hear the conversations that are being said around you. You're just so locked in, laser focused, trying to overanalyze whatever thoughts in your head at the moment. So that kind of, it's interesting how that ability of dissociation is a part of being an INFJ, and it seems, at least in the opinion of the DSM, that dissociation is a defense mechanism towards repeated abuse. This theory also lends to why we're so rare, these two types, why INFJs are the rarest of the 16 types, and ENFJs being right behind us as the second rarest. And it also, this theory also gives credence to the reason why there's more female INFJs and ENFJs than males, because usually, more often than not, abuse victims are more likely to be female than male. So, that also adds up. Now, there's definitely some evidence in the other direction that says, we were all born with these personalities, but it is an interesting theory that certainly, professionals in the subject of psychology and psychiatry should further explore. And again, it would explain why INFJs and ENFJs are such a target for abuse, at least on some level, because once you're an abuse victim, you tend to be a magnet towards abusers. They tend to look for certain traits in people that they would think would be easy marks. And for us, it's our empathy, our willingness to help people, and especially with ENFJs, their inability to say no and stand up for themselves, especially earlier in life. I mean, INFJs, we struggle with that as well, but we're more likely to just door slam them or gray rock and just shut down and be emotionless robots to people like that, and not let them in and give them any personal information or let them in our circle of trust, because we struggle with trust. We have trust issues, and that again also would explain abuse. Because we're such targets for abuse victims, may also explain the genesis for us INFJs more so than ENFJs, our struggles with trusting people and letting people in, and being so selective on who we let in. Why we don't have that wide of a friend group as INFJs. And while ENFJs do, they have a very wide range of acquaintances. They really don't have many more like true confidants than we do as INFJs. Just their nature as extroverts. They need to be more social, and they tend to have a wide range of acquaintances. And it's interesting to point out with the INFJ, the abuse theory could also point out as to why we're often so locked in our own head over analyzing things. Because again, with living your life on trial, we could always feel like something's coming, like we have to explain ourselves with something, and we want to be able to be prepared for that moment and to be able to give a concrete answer as to why we did what we did, why we have the opinion we have, so that we can explain it at such a detailed level that no one can deny it, and it would therefore justify us. ENFJs, with their wide social circle of acquaintances, that could be, in the abuse theory, could be their way of getting away from the abusers, always having, a friend to go to, a friend to turn to, a reason not to be near the abuser, and a reason to be somewhere else. They tend to be very active, very motivated people in, activism, volunteering in their careers, and whatever. So that could be their way of coping with abuse. Again, this is just, a theory that I've read a couple articles on, and I've seen a couple comments of people wondering about. I wanted to give my thoughts on it and basically say it could be either way. I mean, it could very well be both. Maybe abuse isn't the total reason of why we form the personalities we did, but maybe it does explain some of the traits that INFJs and ENFJs have. So thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe to the channel, and I will have more content coming shortly.